We're live. We're officially live. Week 1, everybody. We made it. Football is back, and whatever complicated things we could talk about with football on Sundays, Monday nights, Thursday nights, when the game is on, it's very uncomplicated. But the games aren't on right now, so we're going to sort through these complications, help you set your Week 1 lineups, and otherwise get oriented to everything on your mind, on our mind, on the NFL's mind. Dr. Gene Bramall, Matt Waldman, Sigmund Bloom here. Thank you, everybody, for giving us this opportunity. As I always feel like I have to make a nod at this moment to the Sunday morning shows I grew up on. Jimmy the Greek, Brett Musburger, Phyllis George. Sunday morning memories. And we're creating some memories here. Doc, let's go ahead and jump in because there's so many things to go through. And probably the biggest change from cruising into the weekend to this moment is a very strong expectation that Will Fuller will be out today. What does that give us? Now, he did make the trip to New England, I believe, as did Kiki Cutie. Got to say that every show. So what does that tell us about his availability next week?
Can we talk about Irv Cross and Phyllis George?
Yeah.
Jimmy the Greek.
Jimmy the Greek was, I mean,
You know what's happening right now is all
it's
the people
coming back
watching on YouTube are just, they have no idea what you're talking about. This is like when I go to work and we talk about those little yellow discs that you used to put inside the 45 records, and people look at me and they don't even know what Seinfeld was anymore. So
we're buying a Bluetooth enabled turntable. So bring it all full circle.
Two turntables and a microphone.
Before he was Brian Gumble.
Yeah.
There's a lot of way back when.
Brian Gumble when he was Matt Harmon.
Yeah, now we're really going old
Matt
school.
Harmon halftime show, by the way, everybody. Matt Harmon is doing a halftime show.
I'm looking forward to that too.
I can't wait. Choreography alone.
The Harmon way. We love you, buddy. It was unclear yesterday when Will Fuller got on the plane to go, and it's not, we don't know whether or not Fuller was pushing to maybe have a chance to play, or if the Texans really weren't, unsure. But both Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport overnight were pretty adamant that it looked like he's got a big chance to play. They at least let him come with the team, so he's going to get a chance to test things in pre-game workouts, but it's not looking likely. And the Texans have options between Bruce Ellington and Ryan Griffin, and you mentioned Kiki Cutie as well, who's dealing with his own hamstring injury. And it would stand to reason, it really sounded like Cutie was further behind than Fuller this week in terms of practice participation and chances to play and just being ready overall, playbook and what have you. So it looks like it's probably going to be an Ellington situation more than anything else, but they'll spread the targets out elsewhere. I think it's pretty doubtful that we see Fuller play, and I think we'll have pretty good indication fairly quickly that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, and I mean, just pulling a number out of thin air, like, are we at least 50-50 he'll play next week, or is this one of those things that might remain in a holding pattern?
I think it's in a holding pattern only because we're still within that window of potential aggravations, and maybe there will be other issues as we go forward this week. But limited practice all week. They allowed him to travel with the team. There was at least some chance they thought that he'd be able to make the active roster. So I think you'd probably questionable is the way you would leave him, because this didn't seem like it was an expected situation, and he had been doing a little bit in individual drills and practice over the last couple of weeks. I wouldn't go so far to say it's probable that he's got a chance to go, but everything that we've seen over the last 3 to 4 days, including overnight, even though he says he's unlikely to play, he was kind of considered a game time decision at worst. So I think that's where we are for next week as well, unless there was some sort of setback and he woke up yesterday and it just wasn't, after Friday's practice, didn't feel good.
Matt, it was not a good day for South Carolina football yesterday. Not at all. But let's talk about a son of South Carolina football, Bruce Ellington. Let's get on your jetpack. And we know that Duke Dawson, the second-round rookie slot corner, is on IR for New England. Eric Rowe is probably going to play the slot there. I don't know what they're going to do about the other corner. I'm going to see some Sammy Coates. I don't know. But Bruce Ellington and also Ryan Griffin, who you did a good profile of 2 or 3 years ago in your RSP materials before anybody knew Ryan Griffin. Well, maybe they knew the backup quarterback, Ryan Griffin. So for DFS players, for somebody looking for a deep play, or otherwise maybe making a waiver wire pickup right before game time to get ahead of the week 2 waiver wire curve, what do you foresee for Ellington and Griffin today?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to be huge for them, most likely. But if you're going to look for someone to give you the shot of a really big play, it's going to be Ellington. And it fits well with what they do with their offense, because you have to understand that in that Houston offense, that Deshaun Watson has some limitations as a thrower, and they figured out ways to maximize that with him, because the arm velocity thing is true. It's just an overblown thing that people make a big deal out of. When defenses decide that they're going to pin him down on the throwing the deep out and the deep comeback with the high velocity throw, kind of like Matt Ryan, who doesn't throw with velocity very well and threw a lot of rainbows. And he did it this past Thursday and got picked off when they tried to go opposite field with him. Deshaun Watson's kind of the same way. He can throw for distance and put air under the ball. So what they try to do is throw the deep post, the deep crossing route, and the sail route, the corner route. And Bruce Ellington runs those routes. That's where he starred at South Carolina, and that's what they'll probably have him do in this particular game as well. The issue will be whether or not teams are going to pay attention to the receiver who's replacing Will Fuller enough to where he's going to be able to run open. I think that's still going to happen, because there's a lot of the play fakes and bells and whistles they do pre-snap will open up the field for Ellington. And I think Ellington is probably your best bet, because what he gives you with yards after the catch and his ability to get open on these types of routes that he runs so well.
So taking that one step further, Matt, does this mean maybe you're a little less excited about Deshaun Watson today? Does it mean a lot of Lamar Miller? Does it mean that we should lower expectations overall for the Houston offense, or do we give Deshaun Watson a chance to rekindle the magic we saw last year? Because this is a game I think a lot of people will read into about, well, it was all fluke last year, there's no way he's going to keep it up, or even a shorthanded, we can see that he is not just an elite fantasy quarterback, but he's that kind of quarterback who will elevate his offense no matter who is around him. Where do you think he's at in his career arc as in a test like today?
Well, he's developing still, and he's going to get better. And he's a player that you still, the way I look at it is this: if you're fantasy owner who doesn't overreact to week one, you're starting him, and you're going to understand that he's going to have ups and downs as he continues to get better and better. If you're a reactive fantasy owner and you're nervous just listening to Bloom ask that question, then you probably either want to calm down and start him and just and talk to yourself every week that he's going to get better, and he may not have quite the game you expected this week, or never have drafted him in the first place. Because he may have some ups and downs. But I think that the way this goes is the big thing you're going to have to hope for this week is that Sammy Coates catches the football. If he catches the football, I mean, he'll get open. He just needs
Vincent
to catch
Smith
the ball.
too. Do you have anything in the RSP file on Vincent Smith? Because he made this roster.
Yeah, I mean, he's speedy, and he's one of those guys that might also fit the bill because of the fact that he has speed, he can get deep, and he can go up and win the ball. So if either one of those guys hit just enough to force the defense to back off early, then it's on for a guy like Ellington. Then it's on. But I think that the issue will be is how much can New England look at the scouting from last year and say, yeah, if we can force Watkins to make the power velocity throws, we're going to be in good shape, because he can't throw the deep out. He can't throw the skinny post as well as some teams, and he's not going to be able to throw the deep comeback. If we can force him into those situations, we might have a chance where he has a disappointing game. But if they're able to play their game like they did last year, I wouldn't worry about it at all. And because he's creative and can move around in the pocket, it's going to take somebody like Derek Rivers to really bust out and emerge and have a huge day for Watson to struggle. I think he'll be fine. He just may not be Tom Brady great in fantasy leagues this week.
And you mentioned Derek Rivers, Trey Flowers, the Arkansas combo, Trey Flowers, Geatrick Wise had a great summer. They actually have a decent group of ends. They got Adrian Claiborne there now. They've got a decent group of ends in New England. Gene, speaking of Tom Brady, great. J.J. Watt is back, but is he back? Is the Houston defense back? They've got the Honey Badger now. They've got Whitney Merciless back, but are we looking for J.J. Watt to make a semi J.J. Watt level impact today?
Hope so. I think it's possible. We're dealing with multiple degenerative conditions there. Matthew's been struggling with knee issues for a while. It took his recovery took a little bit longer than expected. Jadeveon Clowney's had something going on with his foot and ankle for a period of time. He's been good through the training camp and wasn't listed on the injury report. Whitney Merciless should be okay. They were just kind of cautious with his hamstring, and J.J. Watt's had a couple of back surgeries. But everybody appears to be healthy. No one was on the injury report. There was some cornerbacks on there a little bit, but they're all expected to play. Kevin Johnson's coming back. It's not going to be much of an issue there. So it's going to be a pretty good test against New England today. There's not a lot of wide receivers there. Marcus Cannon's been a little bit dinged up on the offensive line for New England, and we're not exactly sure how that running back situation is going to play out with the division of touches. But I think that defense, it's as healthy as it's going to be. And, your question about, are we going to see these guys stay healthy all year? They haven't necessarily yet. You know how I feel about the injury-prone conversation, but those guys need to prove that from week in and week out they can stay healthy enough to practice and be healthy enough to finish games. They're coming into the season as healthy as they've been. They've all had a full off season to recover, with the exception of Merciless, who's getting over that hamstring strain. But I'm looking forward to see how they go.
So about that backfield, Matt, what's your really quick, Gene? Sony Michel, I mean, is he in that we need to see him for a week before we trust him for fantasy, and this is not going to be that week?
I don't think he's going to be active this week. I think much was made of Rex Burkhead's knee injury when it was called. It's just kind of one report that there was a tear in the knee. It wasn't any more specific than that, and everybody kind of overreacted. Would we have been concerned about Rex Burkhead if that comment wasn't made? Because he's been practicing for 3 weeks. We know that the Patriots like him. We know that Belichick likes him, and he's going to be used when he's in there. The difficulty with the backfield is always that until the same players are in the same roles for a number of weeks, it's really difficult to predict which role Burkhead is going to play. Over time, it was relatively evident what they were going to do with Corey Dillon and what they were going to do with Dion Lewis and what they were going to do with LeGarrette Blount. It became a little bit more obvious over time. I don't think we're there yet. I think we know what the skill sets of those players, Burkhead and James White, and just lost my mind there for a second with Michelle, who's the
Jeremy Hill.
Yeah, Jeremy Hill. So I think those guys have pretty defined roles. Burkhead is probably the most versatile of the group. Mike Reese made me a little bit nervous this week when he kind of suggested that all three of them were going to see about 15 to 20 snaps. But I don't think anybody knows that question yet. So I think Burkhead is fully healthy. I'm not concerned about his knee. The question with Michelle is, and Bill Belichick said this, and we hardly ever get this information out of Belichick. He said it just didn't seem like he was game ready yet. He's not there. And whether that's because we're still in a physical recovery phase or the time that he missed during training camp has got the coaches to the point where they don't necessarily trust him to be able to do what they hoped he was going to be able to do, is an issue. But this isn't Brandon Bolden. This isn't a number of the other players they've had over the years where they're signed as free agents or they're acquired in other ways. This was a first-round pick that they expect to do something. So when he is fully healthy, I would imagine he and Burkhead are going to have a major role. And then whether we see White and Hill work into some other areas, I think that's possible. I'm not too worried about Michelle. It has been a long time, but I think it has as much to do with just them bringing him along slowly and making sure that what they chose to handle early in the preseason doesn't again become a recurrent, or at least they take as many steps as possible in the hopes that it doesn't become a recurrent issue as the season goes along.
So, Matt, what's the angle on the backfield today? Or is the angle stay away, get some information? It's a fact-finding week and not a week to depend on a Patriot running back.
Yeah, I'd say that's the latter because really when you look at it, I mean, Houston has a good defensive front. They seem to be healthy enough to go. Linebackers aren't bad. I think that this is a situation too where, they're going to, this is a game that I think is going to be a higher score. And if there's anybody that you're going to go with, it might just be James White if you're just really looking as a flex play and just go with that safe. I'm going to get some points because this whole Burkhead thing, I mean, I like Burkhead and I compared him to Fred Jackson. And then we found out that Bill Belichick basically sucks his thumb whenever he sees Fred Jackson on tape. So it's kind of one of those situations where he's very enamored with this whole Burkhead situation, but I think we know that maybe that has even worn off a bit once Sony Michel gets into the lineup. Because I honestly think by as long as there's no setbacks, I think by mid-October, we're going to be talking about Sony Michel as being one of the better rookie backs in performance of the this year, even though everyone's kind of forgotten about him because of what happened early.
Right. The prescription is Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, some of these drops after week 1, week 2, when people are getting impatient. And it's funny when you were riffing about Deshaun Watson, Gene, just file this away. Maybe you could do something each preseason of if you draft this player, you should get a prescription for whatever drug you'll need to endure having them on your fantasy team. You know, some you might need some Xanax, some you might need something to wake you up, some you might need something so that you can sleep at night. Because certainly fantasy.
Something tells me that the two of you would be better qualified.
We can at least consult with you, right? We could say we consulted with an actual doctor for this article.
Well, I mean, I had family that, you know, they had Tums on the dinner table, basically, like they passed around like an after dinner mince. So maybe I'm glad I didn't eat there all the time, but I mean, maybe what's a lot of people will need is some Tums.
Indigestion. Really quick, and I know we spent a lot of time on this Houston New England, but it is one of the potential high scoring games and ones with so many questions. Matt, when you wake up this morning and you hear that indeed all that flurry, you remember that flurry one day when the Patriots Super Bowl odds changed and there was all this talk that Rob Gronkowski was going to get traded? Well, Ian Rappaport says it was true. And Gronkowski said, no, I only want to catch passes from Tom Brady, and they smoothed it all out. Does that at all affect your view of Gronkowski or the Patriots this year?
No, not at all. Because, I mean, professional teams handle things professionally, even when there's a whirlwind of reporters asking questions that normally create dysfunction for dysfunctional teams. And I think that it's just one of those situations where, you know, if you have the coaches who are just like, we already know that the media doesn't really have a clue about what we're doing and how we go about doing it to the level that they need to really truly understand. We know we're going to get uninformed questions that are going to appear ridiculous at times, and they're going to make a lot out of little because that's all they have. So I think that this is that type of situation. You have the Bill Belichick's of the world, and you have the Moras of the world, and the Moras will lose their minds, and the Belichick's will just kind of stare at you and look at you like you're an idiot.
That's a tremendous, like, all-time Matt Waldman quote there, that professional organizations will react professionally to things that dysfunctional teams react to dysfunctionally, just like human beings, really. So let's talk about a human being playing quarterback for the Colts, Gene.
Humans. Let's talk about humans. Can't we?
Yeah, back to humans. Oh, this is a whole. Sometimes I wish people could hear what's left on the cutting room floor. Yes, let's talk about humans and with this odd shaped ball they play with on these fields with lines all over it. Andrew Luck, how hesitant would you be to play him this week if you had another option? And how does that then affect players like Doyle and Ebron, the tight end combo, and one T.Y. Hilton going up against the Cincinnati Bengals defense that is certainly no pushover?
I don't think we know what we're going to get from Andrew Luck yet. He's thrown 32 passes this preseason. And although they were against live game action and he did take a couple of hits and he felt pretty good about the way he played, we're talking about a quarterback whose shoulder has been jacked up since at least 2015. It's been 3 years. And maybe he had some wear and tear or something prior to the injury that happened in September 2015. And he's played since then, but he has not thrown with anything close to a pre-injury shoulder for 3 years. And there have been some suggestions in multiple reports that he's kind of revamped his throwing motion a little bit. So I think there's every reason to suspect that accuracy, throwing strength, timing, all of those things are going to take some time to come back. What hasn't been solved in the 3 years that he's not been there is the offensive line. And there are still issues. They added Ryan Kelly. That was a big add. But it's unlikely, I think, that we're going to see Anthony Costanzo play today through the hamstring strain. It stands to reason that after an aggravation that kept him out of practice for a month this preseason, that they're not going to have him practice a couple of days and then go right back in and risk another significant aggravation. So I think he's likely to be out. Denzel Good has already been ruled out. So his two tackles are going to be different. And they're facing a Cincinnati offensive line that can bring pressure. They got a lot of situational pass rushers. Carlos Dunlap is there. Geno Atkins coming up the middle. They've got a couple of linebackers that know what they're doing. They're not afraid to throw a safety into the mix now and then. So I'm not saying shy away because there's a good chance that this game becomes a shootout. It stands to reason that the Colts defense isn't much better and the Bengals are going to score some points. So Luck is going to be back there throwing the ball. But I don't know that you can expect a 65 to 70% completion rate and lots of downfield passing. They're likely to kind of manage the game plan a little bit differently as much as they can. And I don't know that we're going to see Luck run all that much. So the days of him being a top 5 quarterback, at least at the beginning of the season, I don't know that you see that. But there are a lot of, there are a number of games this week where you can chase quarterback play. And you probably do not have Andrew Luck as your quarterback one at this point. Maybe you do because of how well he did during the preseason. But I think I'd be looking someplace else this week, thinking that there's a risk of turnovers. There's a risk of not injury, but just ineffectiveness enough where you don't have the, despite what a good game script there could be, the upside is going to be a little bit more difficult for him to follow through on than you would expect. And hopefully we see him back to close to his pre-injury form, if not NFL caliber form, within a month of the season or so. But I think we're going to have to give this a couple of weeks and see how he does against top caliber defenses and and the starters for teams as we go.
Matt, do you have any Colts decisions today, including one Jordan Wilkins?
No, none at all, because for exactly what Gene mentioned. I mean, but I'd say that if you were going to go with one, yeah, it's probably going to be the check down running back. And I'd say Wilkins or Hines, and I would probably say Wilkins would be the guy that you're going to really want to look at because of what he does and that he probably offers a little bit more in pass pro, and they throw a lot to him as a check down. And you're going to see here that, like you said, I mean, to me, if you're playing in a bizarro fantasy scoring league where it's like and I've done this with Mike McGregor at Draft Buddy and FF Today, is that we set it up a league where it's like pick the worst performers of the week.
Yeah.
And like Andrew Luck might be on that list as a candidate because of, I'm looking forward to seeing Carl Lawson. Like I love watching Carl Lawson rush the passer, and the moves he has they're unbelievable and the league just unbelievably great. And when you have Geno Atkins pushing the middle of the pocket the way that he can, and you have guys like that on the on the sides there and with pretty decent coverage, the fact that Luck can't actually, doesn't have a line that when they drop 7 and rush 4 that they can't hold up against 4 down linemen is a big issue. So I would say, yeah, look for the check down running back, and then that's about it.
On the other side of this game, it sure seems like speaking of South Carolina football, Sky Moore, undrafted rookie, I think starting at middle linebacker today, or it's possible. That's where they are. Although where's Green Bay that they actually traded for an Indianapolis Colts linebacker a week or two ago. But Matt, it does seem like this Cincinnati offense will pay off like a rigged slot machine. Does that mean you dabble in some John Ross, or is it maybe one of those situations where we're looking at the right situation but not the right player? Is it Tyler Boyd actually that steps up and takes a bigger part of this offense today?
It could very well be Boyd, but I think they're going to want to try and get Ross involved pretty early because they want to have enough tape established that Ross can take the top off of a defense, and that way that they can do a lot of things later on in the season that force defenses to scout towards that. So I think we're going to see a fair bit of balls fed to Ross this week. And I think also you just look at the situation, and I think that he makes, if you have 3 or 4 wide receivers that you start and you've got that guy who's doesn't have quite a great matchup, but might be the guy that you would start normally, but he doesn't have a really good matchup, then maybe you go with Ross and take a chance on that because of the way that it looks right now, and it's week 1.
Gene, us humans can get emotional about things. And if we've had Tyler Eifert, speaking of Bengals, or Jordan Reed, or even John Brown, Smokey, emotionally, when it comes time to check that box, you might feel something pulling you back. You might feel some hesitation. Is that rational emotion based on the past, or because it's a clean slate, it's week 1? And the thing is, they all have, I haven't checked to see if there's a monsoon in Baltimore or not, but assuming weather, they all have great matchups today. They all have situations today that are rife for fantasy goodness. So because of their past injury situations, so that give us pause, or this week we give them a pass and we'll talk next week?
Yeah, I think it always has to give you a little bit pause because each one of those players has a condition that it's unlikely that they'll be fully recovered from. I think Jordan Reed's a little bit closer than the other two, but John Brown's sickle cell trait and the issues that he has with cramping and recovering from injury is not going away. Tyler Eifert's multiple back surgeries due to the degenerative conditions that he's got along his spine are not going away. You hope that Jordan Reed's foot injury is behind him and that all the care and the caution that Washington took with him this preseason by limiting his reps and keeping him out of the preseason gets him into the season healthier than he's been at any point in the last 2 or 3 years. And part of the difference with that this year is the expectations and the investment that you put into them on those players on your fantasy team you weren't expecting them to be a major part of your offensive attack and your lineups. So, but yeah, I think from a clean slate perspective, each one of those players has been practicing without any limitations really over the last couple of weeks. And again, Washington kind of held back Reed a little bit, but there wasn't any limitation when he did practice. None of them were on the injury report at all. Nobody felt like they needed to be limited and managed going into this week. So we're going to get a very good idea today what their offensive coordinators and coaches think about them. Are they going to be a big part of the offense? What's the target share for those players going to be? How are they going to be used? What sort of high leverage situations are they going to be used in? And if we see the coaches show confidence in them and we see them not on the injury report next week, then you would think it would be all systems go for all three of those players, with the usual week-to-week caveat we have with lots of other guys. I feel pretty good about each of those players coming into the season, but again, given the conditions that they have, they probably do carry a little bit more risk than others.
Just seeing some stuff coming in this morning, by the way, that the Steelers are not expected to trade Le'Veon Bell, although Adam Schefter says some believe he may be in by the end of the month. Randy Gregory had another substance-related incident the NFL is going to rule on. Also, LaShawn McCoy is not expected to be charged. So just want to give people those updates live as we see them. Matt, sticking with Washington, pivoting off of Jordan Reed, you wrote an excellent defense immediately of Adrian Peterson's potential value this year. And at the moment, if people listen to you, he probably costs 3, 4, 5 rounds less than what he ended up costing. But does that mean you get cute with it and you play Peterson week 1 at Arizona, knowing that Arizona is installing a new defense? Robert Nkemdiche, he's been banged up and he hasn't really played up to his first round status anyway. I'm fascinated with Washington's offense because their offensive line is healthy and Alex Smith could, I think, be just as good as running that offense as Kirk Cousins. But does this all translate to Peterson having a rousing success in week 1?
I'm starting them, and I have Marshawn Lynch, and I've got Jamal Williams as options, but I don't like either of those matchups compared to Arizona because, if Robert Nkemdiche is actually going to be your starter, that tells you that, he's a massively talented guy. He's just not a very skilled guy. And there's a little bit of a difference there. And the fact that he's hurt, and you look at these linebackers, and they're backups. Gerald Hodges and Josh Bynes are kind of, they're kind of marginal starter types, who play just good enough pro football that I feel okay with. And yeah, you've got Buchanan and Hassan Reddick, but Reddick is young. Buchanan is a lightweight, and you're looking at this and I'm thinking, this is ripe for Adrian Peterson to basically say, it was fun last year. Now it's going to be fun to run you over. And I think that's what we're going to see. If you're going to start him anytime, you better do it early, because I think that's the time. It's the later weeks that we're going to be more skeptical about how this goes. Like, can he hold up, and can he take the pounding, or our team's going to stack the boxes and figure it out, or what's going to happen here? I think he's one of those guys too that, like, you just see him. Even like he's been laid off for for the whole summer, hasn't played much. First game back, he looks like, Adrian Peterson without the big time speed. He's a good first impression back. He's one of those guys that I think starts hot, plays hot early. So you might as well start him week 1.
Absolutely. That was why they signed him. He came in for the conditioning test and he wasn't winded at the end of it. And they said, okay, there's something
He's
here.
Darrell Green of running backs, maybe,
Man. Yeah.
Another name to look up.
40? Yeah, right. For all of us old people, we know who Darrell Green is. Speed has been around in the NFL, always been a difference maker.
He can still beat Michael Crabtree in a race.
Oh, surely. He could probably beat Des Bryant in a race. Speaking of people who are getting a layoff, Gene, I have a lot of questions about the Tennessee-Miami game, and one of them that you may or may not be able to help, you may just tell me that's the correct response, is whether to play Rashard Matthews this week, coming off that meniscus surgery. And we tune out a little bit once we get to the 4th preseason game, but these practice participation, as you said, with Brown and Reed and Eifert, their practice participation hasn't given us any signal that maybe we should be hesitant to play them at least this week. What about Rashard Matthews?
Same. I think that the type of procedure that he had, you would expect, we've seen players, including running backs and linemen, recover through a bye week after a meniscus procedure. And every one of those is a little bit different, but they took some extra time with him, didn't have any difficulty bringing him off the PUP list. He returned to practice right away, isn't on the participation or game status report. They're expecting to use him as they normally would. And it's not necessarily the type of injury that you would expect to immediately relapse. Again, everybody comes in with a little bit of a concern there. And by removing the meniscus, you leave a little bit of piece of cartilage exposed there for potential issues. But he's been fine in practice since he's been deemed to be recovered. And I would expect them to use him as they did before the injury last year.
So, Matt, what are the angles on this Tennessee-Miami game? This one really baffles me because Mariota didn't look like a new and improved quarterback. Corey Davis could get Xavier Howard. I love Taywan Taylor. I don't know how much they're going to play him. We got and Gene. Anything from this week on Delaney Walker's toe?
No, another one where the practice report sounded a little bit concerning when he was said to be limping off and then didn't come back to practice for a week or so after. But Delaney Walker plays through just about anything. A number of soft tissue injuries and muscle strains over the past couple of years where he's questionable or doesn't practice and then plays a good number of snaps and is productive. Like all of these other players that we've talked about, he's not on the injury report at all, wasn't limited in practice, so it seems like a non-issue.
So you've got that one, Matt. You got Delaney Walker against those young Miami linebackers. On the Miami side, no Devontae Parker. And has it all really come to this? I'm not even sure if Devontae Parker's worth a roster spot right now. I know Kenny Stills is. I don't know if he's worth a spot in my lineup. I know Kenyon Drake is worth a roster spot. I don't know if he's worth a spot in my lineup with this Frank Gore stuff. And there's Danny Amendola. Ryan Tannehill's back. Are there any angles on this game? Because it's giving me a headache.
Yeah, it is kind of a headache-inducing game. I like Deion Lewis against those linebackers too against Miami, so I think he's another guy that you probably want to pick up because we'll see though if that footwork that Marcus Mariota has gotten sharp enough that he can go from the primary read to the check down and throw an accurate pass. I think he will, but there's some questions about that. I would say on the Miami side, certainly Amendola seems like a good bet for a high number of catches against Tennessee's linebacking core, which also is kind of weak against the pass. I don't think you don't look at Gesicki, I think, as a high volume target. I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Derby or even Smythe at some point outproduces him on a certain level. If you're looking for DFS, like just long shots and you like playing long shots, Jakeem Grant might not be a bad player. Albert Wilson, because Grant looks like he's going to get some outside time a fair bit replacing Parker, and he's a speedster and probably also one of the best open field runners that you're going to see around the league, that people don't know about. So he might not be bad on that level. And then on Tennessee's level, I mean, also Tajay Sharp. Tajay Sharp has a connection with Mariota. He's very good over the middle. He's bulked up. He looked good all summer long. So those are guys that you're probably not going to start. You're probably not going to take a chance on. But if you're in one of those odd leagues where you really need to look at names like that, those are ones I'd mention.
Yeah, Tajay Sharp showing up. This is one of the situations where we threw a party for Taywan Taylor, and Tajay Sharp ate the cake before we could have the party. And then actually, because it's Marcus Mariota, it wasn't even a cake. It was like a big Rice Krispie treat or something. So not much of a party in that game. We'll see. Speaking of parties, Gene, folks who were bold enough to take Saquon Barkley in the first round, especially drafts a month ago, they want to get ahead of the curve. They're ready to open their present this morning. Game against the Jags is a tough matchup. Is this going to be one where we see everything works, the batteries work, the remote control works, and he's going to zoom around even though it's going to be the biggest test of his football career? Or we're going to open up the box and maybe the parts are broken or we need to get new batteries before we can play with this?
I don't think any of the parts are going to be broken. Whether or not the battery does exactly what you wanted to do probably remains to be seen. That Jaguar defense is pretty good. The Giants are at home. That might help them a little bit. But ongoing offensive line issues, not injury-wise, but just in terms of quality of play. The thing that Barkley's got going for him is that he's likely to get as many targets out of the backfield as he can handle. Because he's good in the passing game as well. So that kind of gives him a high enough floor that even if he only ends up getting 12 to 15 rushes because of game script and how well the Jaguars front seven plays against the run, then it's likely not to be that big of an issue. But I don't know that I expect a very high yards per carry today.
Matt, let's spend a little bit of time on this game. It's an interesting one, the Tom Coughlin revenge game. I don't know. The Giants didn't exactly treat Coughlin with a ton of respect whenever things went south. And I think they figured out, a la the Eagles, Ben McAdoo wasn't the answer to their ills either. What about on the Giants side? We spent a lot of time this summer, even in the offseason, talking about what Matt LaFleur is going to do to the Tennessee offense, or what Matt Nagy's going to do to the Chicago offense, or even a little bit of what Frank Reich and Nick Sirianni will do with the Colts offense. We haven't talked all that much about Shermerula, Pat Shermer and Mike Shula, and this is a great first pop quiz for them. So, I mean, rational coaching might dictate it's Sterling Shepard in the slot. Remember, I think it's DJ Hayden in the slot. I might be wrong about that, but I know it's not Eric Colvin because he's on the Houston Texans now. But also, rational football watching would dictate that, hey, if I'm looking for a quarterback to make an offense come alive, I might not be Eli Manning. Or it could just be that, hey, don't get too ahead of ourselves when it's Jacksonville, because we saw how Jacksonville made a lot of good quarterbacks look last year. What are you going to be watching for when the Giants have the ball? And outside the obvious Beckham and Barkley and Ingram, do you think that Shepard could be someone to try to shoehorn into your lineup this week?
Can Eli Manning take more than 5 steps without getting hit? That's basically what I'm going to be watching for in this particular game, is how good that offensive line, how well that offensive line holds up. Because when you take a look at what the Jaguars can bring to the table with, Ngakoue and Campbell and this defensive front, and then on top of it, these linebackers are quick. So I'm wondering how effective these screen passes that our man Shermer likes to throw are going to really work against this linebacking crew of a former linebacker and Miles, or a former running back and Miles Jack, and then Telvin Smith, who runs like a running back. So I look at that situation and I just wonder if this is really a great week for the Giants. This is those games that, like, when I look at the Giants players, I'm like, I'm a little nervous about wanting to start anybody from that group as well, just because I don't know what to expect from that offensive line. If the line plays well enough, Barkley's good enough to have a big game, and I think that we can look at Beckham and against Ramsey, and Beckham's just as liable to burn Ramsey as Ramsey is to shut down Beckham. So it's kind of an even thing. But then you look at it and say, well, AJ Boye, can he handle Sterling Shepard? Absolutely. As good as Shepard is, Charlie's going to be mad on Matt Harmon's halftime show probably. So, because he likes Sterling Shepard so much. But be sure to tune into that. But I would say that that's one of those situations where you look at this game and the best situation might be even Ingram matching up against some of these athletic linebackers. Seems like that it's kind of a stalemate there. So to me, it's all about that line. And when you're saying, how are 5 guys going to perform to make everything else go? I'm like, forget that game. That's like when you start the meme with all the math calculations going on, and you're like, yeah, that's kind of where I am with this game.
It'll be fun to watch. Will it be fun to watch? I like to say, when we start a wide receiver or tight end, we're starting the quarterback, and you usually point out the offensive line too, and the mind of the offensive coordinator, all the equations and things going on there. Do we get a little slice of Blake Bortles in our lineup this week via Keelan Cole or Dante Moncrief or D.D. Westbrook? Or even Austin Sperry-Jenkins with the matchup? Certainly tight end streamers are going to look at that. And Gene, Austin Sperry-Jenkins good to go?
Yeah, looks like it. Back to a full practice, not listed on the injury report. There's something the spidey senses are tingling on that one for later in the year. Maybe nothing, but whenever you hear core muscle injury and aggravation, players kind of play through these sports hernia injuries through the year. But if it's already being aggravated just with a twist to catch a ball in practice, you have to be concerned about whether or not it might continue to crop up on them. This week should be good to go.
So do we dabble in this Jacksonville offense, knowing that Blake Bortles did not have a spectacular preseason, but also knowing that the Giants still have linebacker problems, the Giants still have cornerback problems, Olivier Vernon is not playing, Jason Pierre-Paul's in another uniform. What do we expect from the Jacksonville passing game? Is there something you can profit from in fantasy?
Yeah, hope. I think that you definitely have hope there, and I would play guys like Keelan Cole. I would give Fournette and Yeldon probably are Yeldon if you're desperate, but Fournette's going to have a big day. I think that the play action game, you look at a guy like Cole, they just haven't used him much. And I think that that's the guy that obviously they're starting him. So this is one of those situations where practice probably looks better than the preseason games to know what's really going to go on there with that passing offense. And just by the way, when you talked about equations going on in offensive coordinator's head, this is the one that goes off in Sarkisian's head right here, the big question mark. That's all it is. That's all you see.
I don't even know what to say about that. I'm looking forward to reading your recap. At a certain point, even just for shock and awe, I wonder if they shouldn't fire Steve Sarkisian and just crowdsource the play calling. I think the crowdsourcing play calling.
Well, it's just amazing it's amazing to me this. The team spent 10 minutes a day after practice as players, offensive players, working on combination routes in the red zone, like, splitting tight ends with receivers and working to get, do two routes at once or three routes in one area at a time. And if you look at all the red zone plays that they called, they did not call a single one of those. So that tells you that the coaches, either the media was more aware that the team was running these practices, off to the side away from the coaches, and the coaches didn't integrate that in, or they just didn't care that the team was doing that because they didn't run a single set of combination routes in that game, which is just mind-boggling.
Gene, it's mind-boggling that the Chargers have yet another key injury. What is going on? Second opinion? It's a bone bruise. You don't need second opinions on bone bruises.
Do you? I don't know. I don't think we know enough about this to know. The only thing we know, I feel like I know for certain, is that although not every walking boot is a major concern, when you're worried about an aggravation or new injury to the foot, and you see a player come out with a bone with a walking boot on, it feels like a week-to-week situation, and you never like to hear that a player is going for a second opinion. You definitely don't like to hear when a player is going to see Dr. Anderson for a second opinion.
Robert Anderson. Yeah, there's James Andrews and Robert, the Grim Reapers of fantasy football.
Yes, in a lot of ways, that's true. So it's impossible to know what bone bruise means. We don't know what bone is injured. We don't know how significant it is. When you go see a surgeon, you almost wonder about surgery, but bone bruise and surgery doesn't go together. So there's more information to come from this. We got a little bit more information when it was termed a new injury and then bone bruise. I think that's the most we're going to get this weekend, maybe a little bit tomorrow, probably something after that second opinion takes place. But prepare for this to be a longer term absence. Hopefully it's more along the 2 to 4 week line than something longer than that, but just not a lot of information until later this week, I don't think.
And look, the Chargers, even though they lost Jason Verrett, they've got Trevor Williams and Desmond King and Derwin James back there now. Even though they lost Joey Bosa, at least for this week, they have Uchenna Nwosu, who the second-round rookie, who might be able to. I mean, I was looking forward to him lining up outside so Bosa or Ingram could kick inside. It is the Chiefs, and this could be like that Louisville-Houston Final Four game where everything's a slam dunk, and whether it's Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey, Hunt. You might want to get Watkins in your lineup. And, of course, we'll be talking a lot this week about what Pat Mahomes does, no matter what he does. But on the Chargers side, Matt, against this Chiefs defense, it does look like Antonio Gates. And Gene, real quick on Antonio Gates, and any hesitation? I mean, I know hesitation because he was sitting all summer, and who knows how big the package of plays will be. But as far as his ramp up, is he ready?
He's as ready as he's going to be. I think
Yeah.
You hit on the two things there.
Yeah.
Is he in football condition? What's the status of some of the chronic things he's dealt with in the past, foot-related issues? Is he likely to have a conditioning situation? How many plays is he likely to play? It's not going to be many. Again, high-leverage situations sometimes work out for the best, but you would be shocked, I think, if you saw more than 3 to 4 targets for him today.
So with that in mind, Matt, is there a Williams that we are looking at, or maybe both Williams? There is no wrong answer when we're setting our lineups with Chargers wide receivers.
Yeah, I don't think there's a wrong answer for either Tyrell or Mike in this particular instance, mainly because this Chiefs defense is going to be a wide open affair. So it's basically the in and out. You're going to have a chance to be able to really get a fair number of points in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if this game gets, is over 45 to 50 points scored. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if there's over 60 points scored combined in this game. This is going to be like an old AFL game when Al Davis was a head coach, And if you don't know what the AFL is, yeah, you can look that up too. So I had to, but just channeling Gene Rammel's grumpy old man in kind of thing. I can do that. See, I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, I would say that looking at this particular situation, the Williams are probably in a good situation there. And you also have to remember that these linebackers are also kind of, there's kind of some changeover with some of these linebackers as well. And what they do well isn't covering receivers either. So I wouldn't be sort of surprised if old man Game gets a few looks in the red zone and does pretty well too.
You know who would have fit well in the AFL? Josh Gordon. But Gene, will he fit well in our lamps? And as a quick aside, it's time for the weather, man. It's pouring in Austin right now. I hope my DirecTV holds up during the games. But the weather's not as bad as forecast, but it's still, I think, 3/4 inch to an inch of rain. Wind topping out in the around 20 or 25 more later in the game. But really quick for people looking for some actionable advice, I think Ben Roethlisberger moves back into the 10 to 20 range, not an automatic start. I'm starting guys like Andy Dalton over him. I think Alex Smith over him. But Juju Smith-Schuster still in the solid wide receiver 2 range. On the Cleveland side, we're going to see a lot of Hyde. We're going to see a lot of targets to Landry. And then there's the question of Josh Gordon. From the injury, I know there's so many layers to whether or not to play Josh Gordon today, Gene, but let's just take that injury layer with the hamstring conditioning test, practice participation this week, how the Browns are handling him. What can you add for that piece of the puzzle?
I think we're probably going to be okay. The footing and the field conditions are going to play a role in risk of hamstring and or compensatory injuries a little bit. I think this is going to be for you guys to discuss specifically what you think about Todd Haley's comment versus what Hugh Jackson said earlier in the preseason, where they're not going to start him, they'll use in a high leverage situation. And Todd Haley is saying this week, he's good to go. I'm going to use him as much as I can. I don't think that's the way it's going to be. The truth is probably somewhere in between, but assuming that the field conditions are okay, I wouldn't be too concerned about the injury risk, although there still is one with aggravation.
That's another new offense we haven't talked a lot about, Matt. The Todd Haley offense, the non-Hugh Jackson offense. I know you've got Josh Gordon on some of your teams. Do you dare play him today?
It depends on whether I'm starting Adrian Peterson. If I'm starting him, I'm not starting Gordon. If I'm starting Gordon, I'm not starting Adrian Peterson. So, I'm kind of trying to divvy up my risk level depending on how I feel about the situation and the format of the league. But when you take a look at this offense, yeah, you're going to see a lot of gap plays. You're going to see a combination of power running with play action rollouts that are going to be designed to get Tyrod Taylor in space to throw the ball deep. And that means that there's going to be some longer developing routes, like maybe some double moves or some deep crossing routes, similar to what you see where Taylor throws a ball well in the same way that I would say, Deshaun Watson does, but Taylor has a little bit more velocity on his throws as well, where he can throw some of these, power throws too. The issue is really 22-mile-an-hour winds and rain, and how this field is. I mean, from what I remember of the Zombie Browns field at this point, it's actually has grass on it, and it's actually in pretty good shape compared to the old school Cleveland Browns that used to play on basically gravel and mud. So this country club version of the Browns I think the field should be fine enough that it's not going to be a complete mosh pit here. It's just going to be a matter about how slippery it is or not. And we saw that there was a pretty good rainstorm on Thursday night. The issue is that the rain stopped, so it didn't completely, saturate the field in Philadelphia. So I would say with Gordon, you can take a shot on him mainly because of the fact that the Steelers don't really have anybody who can cover him.
No.
And so, looking at it from that standpoint, yeah, most teams don't. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, you also have to understand that really, they're going to be, the way Haley put it was, I sure hope that I can play him as many snaps as I want, which means maybe he's figuring out what type of horse tranquilizer won't kill Hugh Jackson, but will sedate him. So,
Him and the rest of Cleveland.
Yes. So I'm thinking that, or whether there's some lake event that they can send him to jump in.
The regatta, yeah.
Exactly. So put him on the good time too. Let him look at some of the dead sunfish, and then he could be okay from there. And we can see, but I think that Gordon's probably going to be in line for, I would think, somewhere between 6 to 8 targets at the least. And that's enough for him to do damage to the Pittsburgh Steelers defense if this team can get going.
And I know it would raise your spirits, especially if you got Gordon in a few of your lineups, and it hurt Steelers fans and it hurt the Steelers.
I almost bought a Steelers hat yesterday.
Wow.
I have a yellow one. I almost bought it to add to my collection, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it yet. I gotta wait until I get all the other ones at the end, until, of course, Dallas and Denver are waiting after the Steelers.
Yeah, so that's good. And Baltimore is a truly never. So going back to Steelers fans being sad, Matt, the biggest saga of fantasy football, this Le'Veon Bell situation. Just add some more data points to it. David Johnson last night signs a 3-year, $39 million deal. First reaction, that's bad for Le'Veon Bell. That's bad. That's not even really. I mean, if $14.5 million franchise tag is more than $13 million, he could roughly get that next year and the year after. But he's not, I don't think, going to get more than David Johnson got. But we know that this week, Matt, Le'Veon Bell's not with the Steelers. So how essential? Because I was asked about James Conner and Carlos Hyde, and his mother's a mutter, his father's a mutter. So James Conner sure looks like a mutter to me. Does that mean that he rises to that level of, when it's time to set your lineup, you better have a very compelling player to put in over James Conner?
I'm starting him over Deion Lewis and Jamal Williams this week in the league because of the fact
Did you have to hesitate, or
no, not remotely, because the Steelers have a good offensive line. Again, it's about the quality of the offensive line against the quality of the defensive unit. If it's even, then you want the better back. If it's an advantage, then you're probably going to want to go with the offense, the player who's running behind that offensive line and going to get the volume, unless he's just a complete doof in terms of being able to run the ball. And if that's the case, there's so much talent at running back across the league and in college and on the street. And I'm sure there's somebody probably in my neighborhood who used to play, who could probably rush for 50 yards behind the Steelers line. Because of the way they're like the shooting guards. And I say this all the time, they're the shooting guards of the NFL, that position. So you plug him in, and I think he's going to at least get 80 yards and a touchdown for you this week. So I think that's a pretty rock solid play due to that line.
Gene, if we were scared of playing Jimmy Garoppolo or Marquise Goodwin or Pierre Garçon because, Minnesota's defense was already so good, and now they added Sheldon Richardson, they also have Xavier Rhodes nursing a hamstring. What have we learned about Rhodes' condition this week as it might affect our decisions on 49ers?
Yeah, it makes you a little bit nervous, but fully practiced on Friday, not listed on the injury report. Would expect him to be good to go. Hopefully it doesn't become a nagging thing that leaves him at risk of aggravation lots of times, but I think he should be fine.
So on that note, Matt, with all of the excitement coming out of last year with Jimmy Garoppolo, you saw what he did to Jacksonville. I can't remember who it was. Was it Jalen Ramsey? Oh, it was just scheme. Like, that doesn't matter. Is Kyle Shanahan going to have something up his sleeve for this game? Or is this a game better to have your 49ers on your bench? And if they have passed the test with flying colors, that's great for the rest of the season, but you don't want them in your lineup to find out.
I mean, no, I think that there's still question marks with the other cornerback. And if Xavier Rhodes is hurt, Trey Waynes is still, he's a talented guy, but again, he's kind of, he's where the Arizona Cardinals wish Robert Nkemdiche would be as a player on the field in terms of, a talent who hasn't developed yet. Waynes is a guy who has talent and has developed some, but his confidence issues kind of have him flagging. So this is a team where I think that the offense is going to be good enough to do some decent work. The issue is I wouldn't feel great about the run game, and I wouldn't I'm not sure how I think George Kittle might be a pretty good play, and I would probably say Goodwin would be a pretty good play. Everything after that, I'd be a little worried about. Garoppolo, I'm interested to see now against those double, the double A gap blitzes that he's going to get, how he's going to do with pressure up the middle of that magnitude. Are they going to be able to get to him with some of those looks, and how he's going to handle it? I have a feeling he's going to do pretty well, even though I was worried about that when he first entered the NFL. So it's kind of a mediocre game, as you kind of highlighted here, and it's just Goodwin and Kittle. And is Kittle even healthy enough to play?
Right.
That's the other question. Is he? I thought he was.
Do you want to chime in on George Kittle?
Yeah.
Right now?
Yeah, him and Matt Breida should both be okay. Both been back to practice. They gave him a little bit extra time with those low-grade AC sprains, but not expected to be an issue.
Then yeah.
Just a couple minutes left. Gene, how excited are you to watch Khalil Mack and a Vic Fangio defense tonight?
I'm always excited to watch Khalil Mack. Doesn't make any difference where he lines up, when or how. Hope he doesn't kill Aaron Rodgers, but even though that's unlikely, I think Green Bay's offensive line is at least intact for now. Whether or not they run through all the injuries that they've had in the past, but Rodgers is healthy. The offensive line is healthy. I don't know that slows down Mack much, but should be okay.
It's going to be that's going to be. I don't want to say a key divisional matchup in Week 1, but that's going to be a great tone-setting game for both of those teams. I have a feeling I know the tone that will be set, the dulcet, mellifluous tones down in New Orleans. But Matt, Austin Carr, starting slot receiver. Anything to see here?
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty good in the red zone. So, I mean, he's a guy that they may be able to. Drew Brees and he may have a connection in terms of being able to find each other in that area of the field. So it kind of may take away a little bit from there. I mean, he was honestly, I thought he was a better prospect than Willie Snead, and Willie Snead certainly made something of himself in that offense. So listen, as long as it's a stick, it might burn in that. And with Drew Brees, I mean, he can pretty much. He's the most flammable substance on earth when it comes to fantasy points.
We always like to warm ourselves around the fire of NFL football every week, and it's a real joy to get to do this 9 episodes a week on the Audible. Of course, you're tuned in always to Dr. Gene's Injury Expectations, Matt Waldman with the top 10 every week, essential reading. And thank you everybody for being part of this Football Guys journey with us through another season, a couple of hours. The roller coaster ride truly begins, and we're pleased. It's a privilege to serve. Thanks everybody of seeing us well up into the 300s, as high as I can remember on our Sunday morning show. So thank you everybody sharing in that excitement for Week 1. I hope everyone enjoys that feeling of weightlessness, whatever's happening with your fantasy teams. As always, folks, thank you for giving us this opportunity. You're so very classy.